It's Ryan Fowler with the Inner Game Group. Tim Costello, Jordan Kurtz here. And we have, well, it's kind of a spicy one today. I guess we've been doing some spicy ones. We got a clip by Dr. Orion Taraban and a journalist talking to Jordan Peterson and Abigail Shrier. They're really talking about the corruption and greed and just how absolutely screwed up our mental health industry is. Yes, it's worse than you thought, unless you've been tracking it. And there are more and more. I've been through the system. I had 100 normal sessions. I had like a dozen different, psychiatric drugs prescribed for my major manic depression, bipolar type 2, and all the other stuff I had. So I know from experience how screwed up this industry is. But that was 20 years ago when I took that crap, 25. It's worse now. So we're going to dive into that because really the real solutions, which is a lot of what we do. And again, we don't treat like medical conditions. We're not medical professionals, but if you don't believe in your ability and value, if you have anxieties and worries about stuff, we can help with that. And we're way better than them because they're corrupt. They're greedy. And unfortunately, now I'm not saying that all practitioners are bad people. A lot of them are just ignorant and think they're using the best techniques. And some of these techniques work to a degree. I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater here. But we have to call bullshit when bullshit is there. We have to point out the corruption when the corruption is there and let you guys know that for many of you, there's a better way. So we're going to cover that today. And I think it'll be very enlightening for our audience. But before we dive into those very enlightening clips that we're going to analyze the crap out of, Tim, welcome to the show. Jordan, welcome to the show. Introduce yourselves, guys.
Yep, I'm Tim Costello with TimCostelloHypnosis.com or TCHypno.com for short. One of the things that we'll cover today, and like Ryan said, the people in the industry aren't bad. They actually go into this industry.
Some aren't, but yeah.
Let's talk about generalities, right?
Some are good.
You're always going to have a couple of bad eggs no matter where you go, no matter what you do, even a bad auto mechanic, right? But the reality is that they bought into a system and are trained and certified and given their licenses through this system that is broke. The people aren't broke. The system is broke. The people probably really want to do good for these people they're trying to help. And some of the things are very helpful if they get to the root of the problem first. Go ahead, Jordan.
I'm Jordan Kurtz with Jordan Kurtz Hypnosis, and I agree with everything Tim said. I think when you run an organization that creates pills, then every solution looks like something that needs to be solved with a pill. So part of the inherent bias is that's what they're selling. So we're going to discuss.
All you have is nails. Every tool's a hammer.
Exactly. So we like to think, and you might say, well, aren't you just assuming every problem can be solved with hypnosis? Well, it's like, not exactly, because many people try many other tools before they eventually go, well, what is this hypnosis thing that people are saying? This wacky hypnosis where they hypnotize you and put you in this trance. We're usually the last resort for people. We are very rarely the first thing people turn to. So that makes me think that we're on the right path in general. So
it has a lot to do with what insurance covers as well.
Yeah,
that's true. We're not covered by insurance.
To be fair, we talk about psychedelics and, again, we're not medical professionals. If you take psychedelics, we're not giving you advice. People, we say EMDR helps a lot of people. We even say cognitive behavioral therapy can help people, although it's slower, but it does have its uses. And I use some of those techniques, but it's to supplement, the main things that we're doing. So when something's good, we will recommend it. But overall, I will say, we do a special type of hypnosis on the video section of my YouTube channel. I'm doing a 4-part series. The first 3 parts are done. Part 4 coming tomorrow about superneuroplasticity. It's backed by science. We show Dr. Andrew Huberman saying, here's the protocol you follow. We follow that to get this accelerated neuroplasticity, rewire your brain. That's what we do. It is overall the best method in the world for fixing bad subconscious beliefs that make you struggle, that cause you to feel bad, feeling inadequate, not good enough, insecure, anxious about all sorts of stuff. It will fix that for most people better than anything else, in our humble opinion. There are some things, other methodologies will work for a small percentage of people. So, yeah, I mean, to be fair, we sing the praises of other stuff. But we do think ours is best. Maybe we're biased, but I don't think so. Go and watch the testimonials. We got 24 up now. We're dropping another one tomorrow. Dropped one last week. I got 4 more recorded to drop. Changing people's lives. Changed Jordan's life, changed my life, changed Tim's wife's life. Tim, your core has always been strong. You're a rock star. So we know it works. That's why we have a channel. We're going to change the world with this. And it's high time something new comes along, because the current industry has massive problems and oftentimes does more harm than good. And there are people calling out the current mental health industry on its greed, corruption, and bullshit. So let's dive into that today. First, we're going to cover a clip by Dr. Orion Taraban. He is a PsyD, doctor of psychology. So he's a psychologist, and he's going to call out some bullshit. You can do a YouTube or Google search, why therapy sucks. And there's plenty of stuff that comes up, but people know this. It's not like we're the first one that discovered these issues. We're looking at other ones discover these issues. So we'll go to Dr. Orion Taraban first. He has a Psychacks channel, almost just under 500,000 subscribers. It's a very rapidly growing channel. I like him a lot. He could benefit from learning our techniques, but what he does is very helpful. So let's go to that first, and then we'll go to the Jordan Peterson interview with Abigail Shrier. She's a journalist, and she has done a lot of research into how the community, especially kids, is messing up kids. Guess what? Kids don't need therapists. They need good parents. But let's cover Dr. Orion Taraban first. By the way, you can try our methods for free right there. School.com, MindChrysalis / MindChrysalis -7138. Our stuff is free. We have paid stuff too. Our free program will help about 80% of people. There are people whose lives are changed. Look at the testimonial from last week on my Super Neuroplasticity Part 3 clip. There's a guy there. His life changed using the free stuff. Guess what? The one we drop tomorrow, another guy's life changed using this free stuff. It's changing lots of lives. 20% of people that do it yourself program, they need one-on-one help. And all of us are available for that as well. So go there, check it out. Free self-hypnosis course, free ebook on how your subconscious mind works and why it keeps you stuck. You just join, and then once you join, click the classroom tab, the SOS free course. It's a 6-part course, all free. It can change your life. So
yeah, hey Ryan, let me jump in here real quick. So everybody understands that's out there. What we use throughout all of the things that we do in a session with our clients is we want to achieve the process of super neuroplasticity. What that means is the ability for your brain to rewire itself. Let me give you an analogy. You build a new home, they put a junior electrician in there, and that junior electrician miswires a few things. And as the new owners move in, they notice some things don't work so perfectly. So what do? They hire a master electrician, and that master electrician comes in and troubleshoots and tries to figure out where the problem is based upon the symptoms that are being shown. And then he goes and rewires a couple things, gets out, and then the house functions properly. We are the same way. As we grow up, we become miswired. Sometimes it's through neglect. Sometimes it's through committing an actual act against us, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, our subconscious miswires itself for its detriment, although it's thinking it's helping you. So somewhere on in your life, you're going to have these symptoms that you will experience. Those symptoms now, you have to tell somebody about. Sometimes they will say, well, here's a drug that will help you mitigate that symptom. You'll feel less anxious. You'll feel less depressed, whatever the case may be. But the reality is they never got to the root. Now you bring in one of us, and we've got a process that helps to determine what the miswiring is. And then we use and we achieve the process of super neuroplasticity. It just so happens we happen to use hypnosis to engage the last couple of things that are needed for the brain to rewire itself. And then we help you rewire your own brain. And then you come out and some symptoms are gone.
And if there's still more symptoms, you do more sessions and keep rewiring. You can do it on your own. Some people need help. We're happy to help one-on-one. One-on-one is more powerful, and we permanently and very rapidly rewire these programs. Yeah. And so you get big results very quickly. Watch our testimonials. You'll see. Here's Carrie. So we helped Carrie out. So just so you know, try it out for free. Take it from there. And that's a community where people help each other out. We're going to start doing webinars again, probably twice a month, to help people with the free program. And the webinars are going to be free too, probably twice a month, Q&A webinars. So let's dive. Thank you, Tim. Let's dive into the clips. First with the Psychacks. Jordan, do you have anything to add, or do you just want to dive into the clip?
No, let's go for it.
All right, let's do this. So this is Dr. Orion Taraban, and he's talking about, some of it's a little tongue-in-cheek. He kind of says, I'm not saying that they're pieces of crap, but he kind of is. He absolutely is. It's kind of funny. But yeah, let's just dive right in.
Purposes, let's just compare psychologists with psychiatrists. They both have doctorates and are both the top of their respective fields. In general, psychiatrists can do anything that psychiatrists can do, with one important exception, which serves
he misspoke.
Practical difference between these two.
He meant psychologists can do anything psychiatrists, except prescribe medication.
Two professions, namely a psychiatrist, being a medical doctor, can prescribe medication. That's kind of their racket. And they guard it very jealously because it's extremely lucrative to keep this particular intervention monopolized under their control. Now, if you have a human problem, like feeling down or on edge, you might be amenable to human solutions, like talking about your problems or disciplining your thoughts. However, if instead you have a medical problem, like major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder, you're going to need a medical solution. And the medical solution that the psychiatric community has functionally decided upon is pharmacotherapy, pills. If you hang around a barber, you're going to get a haircut. By the same token, if you go to see a psychiatrist, you're probably going to leave with a prescription. Why? It's kind of what they do. And this is not an intervention that people can do for themselves, because the mechanism of action is kind of outside people's domain of control. And this creates a dependence on this class of specialists. People need psychiatrists to treat mental illness in the same way that people needed the church to perform exorcisms.
You're not dependent if the problem's fixed. You're dependent if you still have the problem and they're just managing it for you. I want to point that out.
They're presumed to be the only people with the necessary tools for the job. All right, so what does this have to do with the reification of mental illness discussed in the first part of this episode? Ever notice?
Reification, by the way, that term is creating something from nothing. And if you watch the video he did before this, he talks about how they literally create mental illnesses where people aren't mentally ill. They just have normal human struggles. But that's what reification is. They're creating problems and providing the solution that they make money off of.
How there are more and more mental illnesses with each passing edition of the DSM? Or what's more, how the thresholds of pre-existing illnesses continue to be lowered to increasingly pathologize the normal range of human emotion and behavior? Like, for example, how it used to be the case that someone couldn't be diagnosed with major depressive disorder if they were grieving, because feeling depressed is a normal, understandable human response to the loss of an important relationship. But how the latest edition of the DSM removed this bereavement exclusion from the diagnosis of MDD? Ever notice how over the past few decades, we've radically overextended what constitutes a mental disorder under the prevailing diagnostic conceptualization? Kind of strange, don't you think? Now, I'm sure this has nothing to do with it, but psychiatrists decide what constitutes a medical disorder. And psychiatrists typically treat mental disorders with pharmaceutical medications. Now, in order for the FDA to approve a psychiatric medication, that new medication needs to be demonstrated effective in treating the symptoms of a specific disorder. And if a particular medication has already been approved for that specific disorder, the thresholds of demonstrated effectiveness for the new medication are even higher than they otherwise would be. And this is certainly unfortunate from a business perspective, because FDA approval of a new drug can result in billions of dollars in new revenue for pharmaceutical companies and those who prescribe their products. Of course, one way around that problem would be to, well, I don't know, create a bunch of new disorders that don't yet have FDA-approved treatments as a way to keep the money flowing.
Just listen to his sarcasm now. His sarcasm coming up is epic. I freaking love this.
So let's.
Okay.
Yeah. So what's key here, and some people won't pick up on, but the patent for a drug only lasts so long.
That's true.
I mean, do you hear anybody now being prescribed Valium? Absolutely not. There's a bunch of other drugs that have new and come along the way that the patent has run out. Billions are done. It's genericized. We need a new drug for a new malady so we can make more billions of dollars, is what he's saying.
Yeah, and what happened when COVID came out? Like ivermectin's helped just tons of people, but no, that's super cheap. What was the other? There was this other drug they prescribed that was extremely expensive, and that's the one that was officially approved. Was a very, very expensive one. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, and it was a smaller dosage of what was in ivermectin, what they use for horses.
Yeah, and it was like just extremely expensive. I think people were paying like $800 or $3,000 or something for the treatment.
Yeah,
and then ivermectin's like 50 cents a pill or 10 cents or something. Yeah, and then the medical, and then the powers that be crapped on that because they want to push the thing that's expensive, that makes them tons of money. I mean, these guys are corrupt as hell. And let's hear Dr. Orion Taraban sarcastically say how corrupt they not.
Well, I have one more thing to add before we do that, and that's, so I'm gonna bring up some anecdotal evidence for one of my clients. And so what I've seen happen is this individual had been going to see a psychiatrist for almost 6 years.
I've seen quite a few myself.
And didn't feel any differently from day 1 to year 6. But what this person told me was that they knew they weren't actually making progress and feeling better, but they felt guilty if they left this particular psychiatrist. And if you don't see what's wrong with that, it's that psychiatrist, in all probability, knows that how that individual feels and is using that against him.
Keep his $300,000 a year salary.
To keep him in that cycle. And
they'll take your money as long as you keep coming. Doesn't matter if you get better or not. You keep coming, they'll take your money.
Yeah. I'm not here to say
it might work better.
I never advise, I don't tell clients, believe me over what your doctor says. But what I will say is, if I took my car in to a mechanic and after 6 years the car was still broken, I might have some skepticism over how effective that mechanic actually is. And not even that, the mechanic knows that they are ineffective, but they keep dangling the carrot. And that's what's really the insidious part.
We have to try out a bunch of different medications till we find something that's a fit for you. That's the line I was given. and it zombified me up, these SSRIs. I almost flunked out of school until I went off of them. And then my GPA went from, I was getting like a 1.6 for 2 semesters, went off 2 semesters later, 3.75, because it just zombified my brain, caused all sorts of side effects.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, by the way, we're just giving our personal opinion. We're not medical experts, not medical advice, but the data's out there. The research has actually shown what they prescribed, which was never proven. It was just hypothesis. These SSRIs, billions and billions and billions of these pills prescribed, 3% more effective than placebo. So barely more effective, and that's being generous.
And this is why this population of people is particularly, I think, vulnerable, because a lot of people who are depressed or have anxiety or feel this shame, they don't often stand up for themselves.
Correct.
And so you're targeting a population of people who is particularly vulnerable to be taken advantage of, and you're taking advantage of them. That's why we exist, is because
just wait till
one of the reasons
talk that we're
one of the reasons
the clips are going to say the exact same thing, and I agree 100%. Yeah.
Fortunately, I think more people are starting to wake up to this. They're becoming less trustworthy of these big institutions who are largely just corporatism,
profit
organizations. But it's going to take some time to change. You have to move the needle. It's like a big, the ship that has to be turned 1 degree. Eventually, you can't turn a big ship 90 degrees immediately. You have to gradually point in the direction you want to go. And I think we're doing that.
Okay.
It's the good news.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. So we got just a little bit more of this Dr. Orion Taraban clip. And then I'm actually going to show a couple minutes of a Joe Rogan and Andrew Huberman review, where he talks about what Big Pharma is doing, and it's pretty interesting. But let's go just a little bit more here.
However, despite the fact that it would clearly be in their financial best interest to do so, and despite the fact that given industry capture of certain regulatory agencies, it would clearly be feasible for them to pull this off, I'm not arguing that they actually do this, as that would be extremely unethical and corrupt.
Of course they wouldn't do that, even though they're incentivized to do so and can.
Yep.
I would never suggest that. Yeah, love them. Yeah.
It's not only that, it's like, even if they don't think of themselves as corrupt, when the incentive is there,
they are.
It's like the desire is going to be there to do that. And so if the whole system is structured in a certain way that people benefit that way, it doesn't even take someone who is corrupt or consciously thinks of themselves as, a maniacal or malicious actor. If that's what everybody else around you is doing, you'll just think that that's the norm.
Yeah. Let's keep in mind there are, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
As wonderful as the ambition is to enter the field of psychology or psychiatry, eventually you're going to have to run a business. And that business requires people who pay for your service. Well, there's nothing better than to have somebody come back and over and over and over. Your hour is up. Your hour is up. I got to get to the next guy. Your hour is up.
Come back
right?
Next week. Pay me another $100 or $150 or whatever.
How fantastic it would be. And by the way, it's pretty hard to get into a psychiatrist or a psychologist without some waiting period. So, there's a lot of people going to them. Could you imagine if you would get into the root of the problem, fix that, and then go to a psychologist so that, guess what? You could actually become fixed, because now, after the root is gone through the super neuroplasticity, the root of the problem being, now you can go there and handle the talk therapy and get out of the self-negative, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to be so much more effective at the things they do. They're actually going to see success in helping people.
Or more often than not, you don't even need them now.
Could you imagine? We probably got about 4 or 5 billion people that need repaired. So
Yeah.
we're going to need them for another 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, they should learn our techniques and use it in conjunction with CBT, because there is some useful stuff about CBT. So
Yep.
we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The good thing they're doing, hey, keep doing it, guys. You know, I used to have this enlarged thyroid on one side of my neck. Took it out with surgery, fixed the issue. You know, it was a problem. I had diverticulitis once. I had a pain in my intestine. Went to the doctor. He's like, "Oh, here's penicillin. Take it for 10 days." Fixed it. No penicillin. I could have died. You know, I had a spinal injury. Got surgery. Fixed it. So modern medicine works miracles, but there are certain aspects of it, especially in the mental health industry, that are corrupt and that they need to be called out. And people need to vote with their wallet and stop using this corrupt bullshit if it's not in their best interest. Now, if it is, go ahead and use them. And if it worked for you, go ahead and do it. And there are going to be cases where that is true. I'm not the one to recommend whether you should go to a psychologist or not, because I'm not a medical professional, but I'm letting you know that there's a lot of bull crap out there. They are doing more harm than good. So use some of your own good judgment, do the research, and understand that you are ultimately the person in charge of your health. And don't just rely on these people blindly, because some of them, there is a chance if you do that, they can make things worse. So I'm going to play a Huberman clip, and that's this Huberman clip's real quick, and then we're getting to the main course, which is Abigail Shrier with Dr. Jordan Peterson, where she's done a ton of research on this type of corruption. And I mean, they're counseling kids on gender identity now, and which is they're still developing. I mean, it's just criminal in my opinion. So we're going to cover that and a bunch of other stuff. But let's look at Dr. Huberman talking about psychedelics and about their business model and why they will never adopt something that just fixes someone very quickly. They're never going to do it. Here we go. So Andrew Huberman talking about emerging pharmaceuticals getting into the psychedelic industry. And talking about that with Joe Rogan.
Really big science, and pharma's moving in very quickly. What they're trying to do is create non-psychedelic psychedelics, figure out what sorts of chemistry changes that doesn't give you hallucinations, and create new antidepressants. That's what they want to do with psilocybin, because doing 2 journeys on a drug and then you're done, that's not good business. And what I love about what Michael Paul.
Boom. What do you guys think?
Well, 100%. Let's dumb down the thing everybody's using for success, and then just feed them along for another 20 years.
We don't want to fix you in 2 sessions. That's not good for our business. He's a Stanford neuroscientist and ophthalmologist. I believe he has an MD and a PhD in neuroscience. I don't know but the Huberman podcast, it's one of the top 10 podcasts in the world. It's like almost 5.5 million subscribers on YouTube. Plus he's on, Apple, iTunes, all of that, Spotify. This guy is in the know. He is a world-class neuroscientist, one of the best in the world. He knows how the industry works. He knows about the bullshit. So now, do you guys have any comments before we go on?
Yeah,
to
part of the issue is they set the expectations for care. So if they set the expectation off the bat that this, how many times have you gone to a therapist and said, well, this is going to be a process where it's going to take, like Ryan was saying, we're going to have you on a couple medications for a couple months to see how things work. Like when you set that as the expectation, you can get away with this stuff.
Yeah.
But if the situation was reversed and what we were doing is the mainstream, and they came along and said, well, we have this solution that'll take maybe 10 years and it may or may not work and you may or may not feel better. Like that's the problem, is they have a monopoly over the idea over what therapy is. And that's why one of the reasons this show exists is to change the idea of how you think about mental health and the speed at which you can actually feel better about yourself.
And what's key is what they're offering is covered by insurance. And a lot of people that are struggling have a job that needs to use that insurance to get better. And they don't get better. They just use the insurance.
Yeah. By the way, all our loyal watchers, welcome to the show. DBB, Leopard Leatherworks, that's Carrie. Thank you for all your great comments, Carrie. P-Dubs, long time, Do a Heart Day, I think is his name, long time follower. Carrie's laying it out for everyone here. The science is out there, and even a lot of these mainstream practitioners are starting to embrace hypnosis, like they're starting to embrace psychedelics for a variety of reasons. I think there are good people in the industry that see the data, see how powerful this stuff is. Hypnosis is kind of like saying I paint with oils, though. It's a very, very, very broad designation. The reason we use the term superneuroplasticity is because we follow a certain protocol in hypnosis to do a certain thing. It's like a really... And psychedelics can be used for superneuroplasticity, but it's a more accurate description of what we do for rewiring. I mean, hypnosis, that includes stage hypnotists doing it for entertainment and no brain rewiring, no therapeutic effect. So yeah, we're superneuroplasticity with hypnosis as a component. P-Dubs, yeah, welcome to the program, everyone. So now to the main course. We're halfway in, but this other stuff very informative. And we are going to go to Abigail Shrier's written 2 books really on the corruption of both psychology and psychiatry, the mainstream. There's been studies done. There was a group of psychologists who redid 100 studies that were peer-reviewed studies in psychology journals, like the absolute best studies, that use the strictest methods and protocols. And these 100 experiments that were redone, only 36 of them they could reproduce. Psychology has mass. That means 64 of the top psychological studies were bullcrap. Abigail's seen this. A lot of people have seen this corruption. Doctoring data. Did you know that AI has in the last year or two has been used as a tool to review medical studies, and because of that, over 10,000 peer-reviewed medical publications research have been redacted because AI went through, reviewed it, and found signs of fraud. This is not isolated corruption we're talking about. It's crazy. So this lady's going to dive in with Dr. Jordan Peterson about this phenomenon specifically in psychology. Honestly, there's lots of good science out there, but honestly, there are some problems. So here we go. Abigail Shrier wrote 2 books on the subject here with Dr. Peterson, and they're going to get into just a bunch of stuff. This is great.
Let's walk through your first book and tell everybody what.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on again, Jordan. It's great to be here. And so my first book was about the sudden rise in transgender identification among teen girls. We were seeing this huge rise in it. Of course, it was very contentious subject matter. And I hypothesized it was part of a social contagion. Kids on the internet, on social media and talking to each other, their friends and therapists, actually, and deciding they were transgender and rushing to start hormones and surgeries. And one of the things I learned when I interviewed hundreds of parents, as I did, and at this point I've talked to over 1,000, is first of all, how much therapy kids were getting, 2, how much parents were relying on therapists to not only help them with their kids, but to guide their parenting. And 3, I learned just how much mischief therapists were making because they often made this sense of being transgender much, much worse. They reified it in these kids. So there's that term again. Reification means creating something from nothing. There wasn't a problem. Everyone has their struggles. Everyone might not everyone, but I think many people
Man, I probably had like 2 or 3 times in my life I was really close to a guy when I was a teenager. And I was like, geez, am I gay because I like this guy? And it's like, no, I love women, man. My hormones strongly prefer women. But there's been 2 or 3 times when I was younger growing up wondering about that. And they turn it into a disorder. Good grief, man. That's reification, something out of nothing. Let's create a problem that we have a solution to so we can make money.
Wonder what other kind of mischief.
And not just that.
Okay.
Like we talked about the element of you want to get people hooked on. So one way of if you're a corrupt organization, one way of increasing your revenue stream is to create something that isn't very effective but requires repeat use, right? There's 2 ways of making enough. So there's 2 ways of making more money, right? You can make each customer worth more, or you can get more customers. And guess what? And she's talking about the get more customers bit. So if you can create more kids who through therapy you've damaged, and now they need more and more therapy, you are now just increasing the amount of clients you have.
She's talking about both, though.
It's
because transgender surgery is very expensive. So they're not only finding people that they make tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars off of per person if they happen to be trans, all of a sudden they become transgender, or they're counseled as a kid who doesn't know shit, and the parents are relying on the therapist.
Medical professionals.
All of a sudden says this 5-year-old's transgender. Great, let's do all this surgery. That'll be $89,000. Thank you. They're creating more problems. They're the top to bottom. They are converting human souls into. It's like the Matrix.
It's a business, man. It's a business.
Sucking you dry.
And I'll say this. I don't assume malice in. I try not to assume malice in everyone who's prescribing these drugs all the time.
Not everyone. Some are misguided.
I would like to say ignorance, but I will say I will assume a certain level of malice if you're a surgeon who's performing these surgeries on kids. I can't justify saying anything other than you being corrupt. I just can't.
Some are ignorant and some are evil.
I find that to be despicable. I find that you should absolutely know better. There's no justification for it.
Yep, that is a whole other show, no doubt.
I have a lot of problem with you messing with kids. Adults are one thing, but you messing with kids, that's a whole nother, that's a whole other bit.
Listen, if it turns out your kid was molested or was violently assaulted and almost died, or something like that, send them to a therapist for that. Everything else, you don't need therapists. You need a better parent. The parent needs to learn. Yeah. And get rid of 98% of therapy for kids.
Mm-hmm. In all scenarios, you need better parents. Even if you still send them to therapy, therapists are not parents.
They're not. And they don't care about your kid, not as much as the parent. So not anywhere near as much.
I see. So
and that's in the best case scenario, they don't care near as much. In the worst case, they don't care at all.
You're trying to make yourself even more popular than you've already been made, eh? Yeah, well, 7 years ago, I started to think, longer than that, but I suppose I said it publicly 7 years ago. I started to think that the universities were doing more harm than good. And that's a hell of a thing to think after you've spent 25 years at top tier universities trying to provide people with a genuine education. And now I certainly believe the universities are doing more harm than good. And I mean, we saw a spectacular example of that in DC last week, which was, I thought when I watched that clip of the MIT, UPenn, and Harvard presidents, that it was the worst thing I'd seen on the news in my life. Just that glimpse that it gave everyone into this bottomless pit of victimizer, false moral narrative. And its unbelievably simple-minded and pernicious effects. Stunning. But, I have thought too, increasingly in recent years, that therapy does more harm now than it does good. And I think the reason for that is that,
Boom.
you know, when I was at McGill,
Is this guy just some simpleton giving his opinion? Is he just some nobody who has no experience in this field or no education in this field? Or is he a world-class expert in this matter?
Well, it depends on who you're talking to, because the industry that he's
depend.
beating up doesn't think much of him, and they're trying to take him down. But
Yeah.
the industry that isn't part of him, they all know it's true.
And maybe they're trying to take him down because he's challenging government power and a money-making machine.
Yep.
in the
He's impeding their ability to make money.
80s, and then through most of my career, the clinical psychologists I knew it was hard to become a clinical psychologist, and they were well trained. They were scientifically trained, and they were careful and methodical, especially the behaviorists, you know.
And honestly, they weren't that great. But they sometimes help some people, they do.
And the psychoanalysts, they were rare and generally extremely intelligent and more creative and open. And so I thought the therapeutic enterprise was a pretty admirable, and I really enjoyed being a clinician. But the whole field got invaded by people who have nowhere near the intelligence or the wisdom to be doing what they're doing. The sort of naive social worker types who are ideology addled to the nth degree. And I had a colleague at Harvard, Richard McNally, who was very concerned about the instilling of false memories by foolish therapists. That started to become a real issue in the 1990s. And as being standard practice,
That's not just hypnosis, it's normal therapists do that? Oh, shit.
you know, to affirm. Well, there's something else we should point out here too that's part of the absolute toxicity of the present environment, is that it's not only standard practice. If you don't do it as a therapist, your college, your governing board will come after you, especially if someone complains. So if you're a therapist and you dare say, especially you can imagine a situation where you're dealing with an adolescent and the parents have somewhat different views of the problem, and you say to the family, as you should say, don't rush into any long-term decisions. You know, this girl who thinks she's a boy or vice versa, the former is more common. The evidence suggests that 80% of people in that situation will grow out of it by the time they're 18, and that the do no harm pathway forward is to provide therapeutic counseling, perhaps, but not to do anything precipitous. Now, one parent takes objection to that, maybe a narcissistic parent with borderline personality disorder, because that tends to be the case in such situations, and decides to write to the College of Psychologists, the governing body, or to the College of Physicians. Well, under the current law and the current culture, the probability that your life will then instantly be turned upside down in some permanent way, and that your livelihood itself will be threatened and your reputation savaged, even assuming that you don't face legal repercussions, is extremely high. So what I've watched, and this has all happened as a consequence of all that bloody flag waving about eliminating the conversion therapy that was never occurring to begin with, right? It's all these consequences of these addle-pated, ideologically enforced laws. And so in Canada, I've been faced with the spectacle of my colleagues knowing full well that everything that's happening on the transgender front is a complete bloody murderous lie, being absolutely unwilling to say anything in public, because if they do, their livelihoods will be instantly threatened by their governing boards. So it's not just standard practice, it's you do it or else. And then that's combined with the fact in Canada, here's another example,
And so
the governing boards that
So when we first, I want to give an example. So when I was first learning how to do hypnosis, one of the end, at the end, we went through this module about how there was this hypnotist who basically had this theory that everyone had sexual, basically sexual assault in their past, and that the job of hypnotists should be to locate that in every person. So they would go in trying to find basically essay. I'll try and be YouTube friendly. And they would essentially what Ryan was talking about with the false memories. They would create more problems. And there was a lot of lawsuits about this.
Yeah.
We now look back at that and go, of course, that was wrong. We're going to look back at what Jordan Peterson's talking about here and go, what the hell were we doing with all this transgenderism in kids thing? History is not going to look kindly upon this.
Yeah.
This is a massive problem. And we're on the people doing this are on the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
They're absolutely corrupt. I have no tolerance for this with kids. They are the most vulnerable population. We all know this because you know how I know this is because all the problems that people come to us are mostly from their childhood. They are the most vulnerable population. I'm not trying to figure out where to end this rant, but I have so much of a problem with what he's talking about. This is absolutely insane.
So why has transgenderism hit so hard in the news and culture in the last, let's say, really 7 or 8 years? It's when it's really taken off. Because if they can get in the news, that has other children question what they're thinking about and then admit that's what I got.
That's a lot
and
more.
then just run headlong into all of the whatever's coming from that.
Yeah. And think of just, okay, this is a level of insanity that our mainstream medical community has arrived at, is if the data shows 80% of these kids that question their gender identity grow out of it.
That's it.
Straighten out on their own. But if you point that out as a therapist, you risk losing your job, losing your license. All other sort, you risk being vilified by the media, just whatever. So, you know, you took post-secondary education for 6-7 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars paid towards getting this certification. They'll take it away. That is the current level of insanity. So,
and then you have no income, which is the pressure.
And then you come to these guys for depression or anxiety. Should you just blindly trust everything they tell you, knowing this? I don't think so.
This is why
if I trusted them, I would have flunked out of school and I would be massively depressed to this day if I trusted the establishment, if I did what they said. Now, some of what they said did help, but some of what they said or told me to do and I did, after a while, I'm like, this isn't helping. I'm stopping this because it would have led me to flunking out of school. It absolutely would have. It was me going off the pills that saved my college career. So, yeah, you know, there are some absolute scumbags. There are good people who are ignorant. There's good people that are not ignorant, but they don't want to lose their entire career. And so they go along. And then there are absolute greedy scumbags.
Yes.
And the higher up you go, the scummier they get. But it's not across the board because there are people high up, such as Dr. Huberman, who just had a hit piece done on him in the New York Post because apparently, you know, Big Pharma doesn't like what he's saying. So they're doing hit pieces on him now in mainstream media. But there are guys at the very top who are speaking the truth, and good for them. Good for them. There's a fight going on here. But the scumbags that are perpetrating these lies and people are massively suffering because of it, the truth eventually wins out, especially with the internet, man. They're not, there's a lot of crap on the internet, but there's a lot of truth that gets out too. So it's only a matter of time. They're going to lose, you know. Anyways, we'll keep going.
You know, and from a perhaps selfish perspective, the worse they are, the more business comes to the three of us.
Eventually, yeah, until 20 years from now, everyone's gonna be doing our method.
Absolutely.
It may not be the only method out there. There are other effective methods. We talked about psychedelics can be very helpful. Dr. Huberman, you heard him saying You take 2 psychedelic trips and you're fixed. That's not good business. He's talking about how that can often happen. With us, I've had people say, I'm going to pay you up front for 3 sessions. I'm going to book them now because I'm so messed up. And then they cancel the 3rd session because I fixed them in 2. I've had that happen multiple times, you know? So anyways, and the people that thought they had major problems, and they did, but when you rewire your brain, it's fixed. Keep going.
Accredit university programs that produce clinical psychologists now, and this is happening with all the therapeutic endeavors, are refusing to grant accreditation to any university that doesn't orient their clinical training towards social justice. And so let's unpack that. So now you train therapists that the world is made up of victims and victimizers, and you insist that they adopt that, guise. And now you go out as a therapist, and some poor girl comes to talk to you when she's 13 and confused, and you pay a tremendous amount of attention to her when she puts herself in the victim position. You covertly reinforce that, partly because you have to legally and partly because you've been addled by your training. And one of the things you know if you're a behavior therapist is that whatever is rewarded will make itself manifest. And so these poor kids that you're talking about who take their mental health diagnosis as their identity, they do that because they accrue the benefits of differential attention for doing so. It's unbelievably toxic. And it's such an indictment of our entire education system, too. You imagine that what we're offering young people as a vision of the future is so unbearably toxic and counterproductive that they will choose to be diagnosed with a mental health disorder in preference to normality.
Yeah. I mean, that's right, obviously. But there's another problem, which is why are parents handing over their kids to therapists?
Bingo.
At the first.
Exactly.
90, unless there's some obvious, like you kid was badly molested or just was in a car accident and almost died or something like really tragic like that, you don't need a therapist. You need a good parent.
And
mom and dad. Mom and dad, both.
And what's the root of all these problems? Just like is mostly a 2-parent household, a loving, supportive 2-parent household. That's the thing, right? Is like, and also that's the solution, because if you have that, the chances of them needing to a kid who has that, the chances of them needing to see one of the 3 of us goes way down.
Yeah.
The chances of them being even in this corrupt system that Peterson just described, you know what could stop that? Parents who know better.
Yeah.
Parents who don't even think to put their kids in therapy to begin with.
There's hundreds of millions, if not billions, of adults that need therapy now because they didn't get that as a kid.
Yeah, this literally is a topic that we could spend 2 hours on very easily, and to go all the way to the root of that psychological underpinning that you should receive as a kid. And I would say, and I'm with Abigail here, if you had good parenting, and then we had to define good parenting, but let's just say that it includes not traumatizing or creating toxic shame in the 5 categories of subconscious trauma. If kids through their 8-year-old understood that they're good enough, understood that they're safe and secure, understand that they belong to a group and that group is good, and that they are not fearful of anything, right? So you probably wouldn't have much rage or anger. So there's one that we don't have to worry about. But if you took care of the other 4, 90% of what Abigail and Jordan are talking about would not exist.
Yeah.
Period. It just wouldn't exist. So like Ryan says, you don't need a therapist. You just need good parents. That sounds like the name of a book I need to write.
For a kid, you don't. Adult, a lot, not all, but a lot of adults do need
now
in this area because of how they were raised.
I said 90%. So then you're going to have 10% or some small percentage that crap happens, and it's really bad, even when you're an adult, and you're probably going to need some help getting through that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Okay, well, and what we do is we don't just fix maladaptive programs. We put the best programs in your subconscious. We do subconscious optimization. honestly, subconscious optimization, everyone needs it somewhat because no one's subconscious is optimized. Just
Right.
FYI. But we'll keep going. That's totally different than therapy. There are people don't need therapy. They'll still benefit from subconscious optimization. We'll keep going.
First indication of any problem. In fact, no matter how minor deviation from a benchmark, they go to diagnose and medicate. And the problem is not only do we not know what goes on in that room, not only does the profession make no effort to track harmful effects of their interventions, unlike doctors who are mandated, to report side effects of their drugs. Not only is that going on, but we're seeing kids have these harms and there's no feedback mechanism. Anxiety is worse. Therapists don't track whether their treatments have made anxiety worse or depression worse.
Yeah, just look at Gen Z, man. She's talking about anxiety, depression. This is Gen Z right here, who has grown up in therapy culture.
For a kid. And we know therapy can do that. And we certainly know the therapeutic interventions, the focus on feelings constantly ruminating on sad moments in your life, the way they're asked to in school. All of that is very bad for mental health. And constantly questioning everything you're going to do before you do it. All of these are the opposite of what we would want young people to do. And that's what therapeutic schooling efforts have done, parenting efforts have done, and actual therapists have done. And I'll say, the last thing is that, parents' unwillingness to assert their own authority in their homes has been a disaster because it let therapists in the door to be that authority. And unfortunately, unlike parents, therapists are incentivized to keep the least sick coming back for the longest period of time.
That's it.
Well,
There it is.
Yeah. Now, I want to point something out. Focusing on your feelings so that you understand them is largely a good thing. Focusing on your feelings to find bad subconscious programs and then fix them so you don't have those bad feelings anymore, maladaptive. And again, hey, if a loved one dies and you're sad, that's not maladaptive. That's normal grief, by the way. Some anxiety is normal. You're on a mountain path 2 feet wide, 1,000-foot drop on the right. You should be anxious. It's keeping you alive. That keeps you extra careful or it makes you not take that path. We're talking about maladaptive, depression, anxiety, stuff that doesn't serve you. Fixing it is good. Becoming aware of it just so you understand what's going on is good. But what they're talking about is just focusing on it and not fixing it. Just focus on it. That's rumination. That is terrible for you.
Yep.
It is. And that is actually one of the things, it's one of the major components of depression. You keep ruminating on stuff that make you sad and you can't stop ruminating. So you don't fix it. You don't.
Ryan, you just muted.
Mute yourself. On StreamYard, I think.
There you go.
There you go.
I'll blame it on StreamYard. All right. Anything else before we go a little further?
We're about out of time today.
Yeah,
was
we're
quick.
out of time. Well, that's actually not a bad stopping spot.
I mean, we could keep
Do
going.
you guys
That's
have
what
any
I'm
final words?
No,
I find that kids are a particularly vulnerable population. I said that before. I'll say it again. I think that, I think there might have been in the past this overemphasis on ignoring your feelings, suck it up, just deal with it. And perhaps the pendulum has swung way too far the other direction, which is consume yourself in your feelings, and every feeling you ever feel is validated. If you feel you're one gender now, that's, so it's like, okay, so maybe there's some, like, I want to think that we are right in the middle where we should be.
There's a healthy in
understand
between.
You need to understand your feelings so that you can master them and reprogram your subconscious so that you understand yourself, so that you become, whole or
we don't run away from our emotions. We master them.
Right.
Part
And
of that
needs
is
to-
understanding and discipline and all these other things.
I talked about
it's not wallowing in them. It's not running away from them. It's mastering.
I talked about tilting the cruise ship a certain direction. That's where I think the mainstream needs to tilt towards, is mastering your emotions, not ignoring, not completely consuming yourself, mastering. That needs to be where the ship is turning to. And I think we'll be part of that. And I'm happy to be part of that, because I think a lot of people will benefit from it.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's money to be made from creating problems where there previously were none. And so we have to take power as individuals and not blindly trust these types of people anymore.
So
Don't blindly trust anyone. Prove us out, please.
Yeah,
I wish. Sorry, go ahead.
As my parting shot.
Okay.
Mastering yourself puts money in your pocket. Not mastering yourself puts money in somebody else's pocket that you're paying for.
Yeah. Alex Hormozy, who made $100 million business by age 30 or 29 or something. He said, when most people give you advice that seems helpful, they're not giving you the advice to help you the most. They're giving you advice that seems helpful that helps him the most.
Yeah.
And Alex, he has almost more than 1.5 million followers on his subscribers on his YouTube. And I think his business is worth 200 million now, from 0 to 200 million, like 9 years. Crazy. It's 0 to 100 million in 7 years. So we don't agree with everything Alex says, but there's a lot of stuff where he has some pretty amazing insights. That's one of them. Just beware of anyone who's going to make a buck, whether it's us or anyone else. Doesn't mean they're bad. They may help you out, but please, please, please do your own independent research and do not blindly trust. Listen to your gut. If something's off, listen to that intuition, research it. Don't blindly trust us or anyone else in this sphere. That's why we say, hey, try our methods for free, man. If they work for you, great. If they don't, sometimes you do need one-on-one guidance. Hey, it's okay to experiment. And I experiment. I did go to the psychiatrist. It didn't work out. I went to the psychologist. It didn't work out. I went to the other one. It did. He really helped me. Great. That's cool. But don't just blindly trust them and follow that Pied Piper off the cliff, please. So that's our show for today. Take your life into your own hands. You absolutely can. The truth is out there. When you find it, you will see your life skyrocket in ways you never thought imaginable, because you truly do have the ability to discern. Maybe you get fooled a little, but you get down that path, you figure out it's fake, false, you go on another path. You will eventually figure out the truth, and your life will take off, because you truly do have more power than you know. That's our show. Thank you very much.